Welcome friends to the Secret Doctrine webinar. This is the fourth class in the series, and today we are going to start exploring some of the shlokas in the second volume of the Secret Doctrine. The second volume is dedicated to humanity, how it began on earth and how it developed. It talks about previous civilizations and evolutionary cycles, including what Blavatsky called Lemuria, and then Atlantis, and then our current civilization. We are not going to explore the whole of it. The subject of this series is the birth of humanity. So in these three classes, we are going to see how what we can call a proper human being, that is, a human being with an awakened mind and a well-developed physical body, how this human being was developed. So let us start then with stanzas 3 and 4 in the second volume that describe the creation of the first root race. This concept, root race, means evolutionary cycle. And the first root race, as we are going to see, is the first stage to produce a human being on Earth during this fourth round of evolution. So the Shloka 11 says, "The Lord of Lords came. From her body, that is the earth, he separated the waters, and that was heaven above, the first heaven," and Blavatsky adds the atmosphere or the air, the firmament. So here we have several characters. One is the Lord of Lords. Then there are the lords that we are going to see who they are. And then the idea of the earth that was being prepared. So Blavatsky brings a quote from Genesis. She says, in the Elohistic creation, Elohistic coming from the word Elohim, which is one of the Hebrew ways to refer to God. Elohim is actually a plural name, and the way Blavatsky interprets this is that it's not referring to a single entity, but to this collectivity of Dhyan Chohans who are in charge of creating physical men. So she says in the Elohistic creation, Genesis verses 6, 7, 8, and 9, God, in quotation marks, creates a firmament in the midst of the waters and says, "Let dry land appear." It is interesting to see how similar this description is in the Book of Dhyan, which is supposed to be a very ancient book, not related to the Hebrew tradition, for example. And then the Hebrew account is quite similar to this. So I think that's part of why Blavatsky is bringing this up. Now, here we are not concerned about how the earth was developed, but humanity. So this verse is only to set up the stage where the earth first has to be prepared. And then the great lords, or the great Chohans, Chohan is a word that means lord, called the lords of the moon, of the airy bodies. "Bring forth men," they were told, "men of your nature. Give them," that is the jivas or the monads, "their forms within. She, the Mother Earth or nature, will build coverings without," which are the external bodies. "For males, females," so it's not males and females, male-females will they be, "lords of the flame also." Before we go on with the interpretation of this, see that this last sentence, it's a little difficult to interpret. The way that seems to be more obvious is that the monads, will be male females, and also they will be lords of the flame. Now, that doesn't make so much sense, although it can be interpreted in a way where this has a meaning. It doesn't make much sense at this point in the development of humanity to say that they will be lords of the flame. We will see what lords of the flame are. There is another way to interpret this that comes from the first sentence. The great Chohan's lords called the lords of the moon of the airy bodies and the lords of the flame also. If we interpret it in this way, it makes sense with the sequence in which the shlokas are describing this process. So we will see that later, but I wanted to point this out now that we see the whole shloka. So let's go exploring sentence by sentence. The great Chohan's lords called the lords of the moon of the airy bodies. So we have here two hierarchies. One that is higher, the great Chohan's, that called the lords of the moon, which are described as being of the airy bodies. So Blavatsky says, who are the lords of the moon? In India, they are called Pitris. Pitris means ancestors or fathers. And these Pitris in particular are called Barhishats, as we are going to see, or lunar ancestors. And she says the progenitors of men, called in India fathers, Pitara or Pitris, are the creators of our bodies and lower principles. They are ourselves as the first personalities, and we are they. Primeval men would be the bone of their bone and the flesh of their flesh, if they had body and flesh. As stated, they were lunar beings. So these Pitris Barhishats are the sixth order of celestial beings, the ones that we have seen in previous classes, that are related to the creation of the physical human body. Now, they themselves are non-physical. They are, we could say, astral or ethereal beings. This is why they are called of the airy bodies. And as we are going to see, they are involved in the production or the creation of a physical body for the monads that will begin to incarnate as human beings. But they need the help of a lower order of celestial beings, in which are included the nature spirits or elementals, as we discussed earlier. And they are said to be lunar beings, or they came from the moon. We are not going to go too much into this, but as we saw in a previous series, it is said that the moon was originally a planet before the Earth was really formed or consolidated, and there was an evolution there. And these Pitris Barhishats are monads that evolved in the lunar chain, and they attained they accomplished the evolution as a human kingdom with whatever form they had when the moon was active. And now they are operating on Earth as these Pitris, as this sixth order of celestial beings. So this is why they are called the Lords of the Moon. And their names are many times related in different ways to the moon. Now they are asked to bring forth men, the Lords of the Moon were told, men of your nature. Give them, the monads, their forms within. She, Mother Earth or nature, will build coverings without, meaning external bodies. So you can see here what we saw in previous classes, that the first human beings are actually part of the substance, the very substance of these Pitris. These Pitris are said to emanate from themselves, part of their own substance, to generate this model body. This double is a more ethereal or astral kind of double, on which nature will build a physical body. So for this reason, when we think of creation in the terms of the secret doctrine, it's not something that some angels or celestial beings or a god created out there from themselves, like operating on something that was separate from them, but it's more a kind of birth. Emanation is sometimes the term that Blavatsky uses. It's a kind of birth by which the monads are using the actual substance of these celestial beings. So let's see what Blavatsky says. In the first volume of The Secret Doctrine, she brings up a commentary that is appropriate in this context. And the commentary to the stanzas of Xian says that these dhyanis, the pitris, are those who have evolved their bhuta, doubles, from themselves, which rupa or form, this form that they evolved from themselves, has become the vehicle of the monads, the seventh and sixth principles, Atma and Buddhi, that had completed their cycle of transmigration in the three preceding kalpas or rounds. So remember, we are in the fourth round. There are a group of monads that have gone through evolution in the three previous rounds, and of course in other planetary chains, but at this point within the Earth planetary chain, they have evolved through the previous three rounds and come to a place where they can start experiencing life and the universe as a human being. So for this group of monads, other monads were not ready, so they are monads that are animating the animal kingdom or the vegetable kingdom, etc. But those who were ready, these are provided of a subtle body that then will become physical, so that they start their evolution as a human being. Then these astral doubles, became the men of the first human race of the fourth round. But they were not complete and were senseless. So this first race of human beings was not physical yet. They were just the astral body, or these astral doubles. Nature remember that we are talking about processes that take millions of years to accomplish. Just as we know the geological times that the Earth needs to develop, the same applies to humanity, to the development of humanity. So when we say that nature will produce a physical body around these more ethereal bodies, that is not something that happens immediately. It actually takes 2.5 evolutionary cycles or root races to come to fruition. So this first race of human beings was not physical yet, and as the shloka says there, it was senseless, and we will see why. Now Blavatsky explains, man, or rather his monad, has existed on earth from the very beginning of this round, of the fourth round. But up to our own fifth race, our own fifth evolutionary cycle within this fourth round, the external shapes which covered those divine astral doubles changed and consolidated with every sub-race. There are several cycles within each root race, within each big evolutionary cycle. There are sub-cycles which are called sub-race, and as with each cycle the body becomes more and more consolidated, at the beginning closer and closer to a physical form, and then once it is physical it keeps on evolving until it gets to what a human body is right now in our fifth evolutionary cycle or root race. So she says the form and physical structure of the fauna around also changing at the same time, as they had to be adapted to the ever-changing conditions of life on this globe during the geological periods or of its formative cycle. So from this point of view, all forms of life in the planet, they change along with the Earth. When the Earth is more fluid or harder or, not really ready to bear physical forms, there was life evolving there, but that life was not physical. That life was more ethereal or even more spiritual. And as the Earth itself consolidates, then all life forms also begin to become more physical. So there is a connection, and this should be obvious that there has to be. There is a connection between the evolution of the planet and the evolution of all life forms on that planet. So animals, plants, when human beings, as we are going to see in the early stages of physical evolution, human beings were giants, and this is why there are many stories about giants and cyclops. At the same time, everything was of a bigger or taller nature, plants, animals, etc. So everything evolves together in that sense. Then the phrase for male females, will they be? Blavatsky says that this refers to the evolution of sexes and the forms of reproduction throughout the root races. So she says this evolution, the evolution of physical reproduction and the sexual aspect of physical beings, proceeded in this order. First, sexless, as all earlier forms are. So this first root race, which was not physical, was sexless. Maybe we can think of how bacteria are. They are single cells and they divide their cells in a reproduction that is asexual. Now I'm talking more in a biological term. Sexual reproduction, even at the level of cells, means that there is, for example, at the biological level, an interchange of genes from the egg and the sperm, for example. So sexual reproduction implies that there is an interchange of genes from these two cells, but the asexual reproduction is just the division of the DNA in equal parts of a single DNA. So what Blavatsky says is that at the beginning of evolution, all reproduction is asexual, is just a fission, a division. Then, by a natural transition, a gradual natural transition, human beings became a solitary hermaphrodites, a bisexual being. That means having both sexes in each of the organisms. And then finally separated and became what he is now. Some human beings are male, some are female. So this stage of male-female is a stage in which there begins to be a differentiation, but the sexes are not yet separate. By the way, you see that in many ancient gods, they are frequently depicted as being both male and females. And one of the meanings of this is that they are referring to these early stages of human evolution, where human beings were hermaphrodite or androgyne. So she says the primitive sexless root race, that is the first root race, becomes androgynous as the races and all on earth develop into their physical forms. First male-female, not separated as yet, after which it becomes male and female, separated and fallen into generation. So if we want to see the pattern, we have in the first root race, it is sexless. We could say that this relates to the unity. There is no differentiation there. There is no male or female. Then as human beings evolve into the second root race and the early third root race, their bodies become hermaphrodite. And this relates, if we take it compare it with the cosmic processes, this relates to the stage where polarity arises. So we could say that the first stage is connected to the first logos that we explored in the first series. And the second stage, that of polarity but not yet separation, corresponds to the second logos. And then in the later third root race, in the later third evolutionary cycle, where human beings become physical, this is the first cycle in which human beings acquire a physical body, very different from what we have right now, but a physical body, then that polarity separates into a duality of male and female, and this represents the third logos, the manifested logos, where duality appears. And from there, once we have a duality, the creative process of reproduction, whether on a universal level or at the physical level, begins. So we can see how the evolution of human beings, as everything else, follows these cosmic patterns, which can be applied to the cosmos as a whole, as we see, or to a single human being. Now, the great Chohans, the lords, called the lords of the moon, we see that, we have seen that, and the lords of the flame also were called. This is how I interpret this last sentence that I was talking about. Why is this meaningful? We have here three hierarchies of beings. The great Chohans, which are the ones that give the order. Of course, all this is allegorical. This calling the lords and all that is just an allegorical way of talking about the different processes of evolution and what hierarchies of divine beings have to enter into activity at which point. But the idea here is that the great lords, maybe they are a representation of the universal mind, call the lords of the moon and also the lords of the flame. So we have these two hierarchies that are called. Now Blavatsky explains, exoteric Hindu books mention 7 classes of Pitris, 3 incorporeal, formless, and 4 corporeal. This is from the exoteric Hinduism. And among them, 2 distinct kinds of progenitors or ancestors, the Barhishats and the Anishwata, or those possessed of the sacred fire and those devoid of it. In Hinduism, they interpret the ancestors, generally speaking, in a far more literal way. Many times they think of the Pitris as the family ancestors. But Blavatsky says this is a symbol for an esoteric teaching, which is actually referring to these divine beings that are our ancestors from a more spiritual point of view. So we have these 2 hierarchies, the Barhishats and the Anishwatas. Blavatsky says the esoteric philosophy explains that the original qualifications that the Barhishats are possessed of the sacred fire and the Anishwatas are supposed to be devoid of the sacred fire in the Hindu allegory. Then she says that this qualification is due to the difference between the nature of these 2 classes of celestial beings. The Anishwata Pitris are devoid of fire, that is, Blavatsky says, of creative passion, because they are too divine and pure, whereas the Barhishats, being the lunar spirits more closely connected with earth, became the creative Elohim of form, or the Adam of dust. So what she's saying here is that the Anishwatas are a higher hierarchy. They are more pure, more divine. They are not really in touch with the lower planes. And the Barhishats are a lower hierarchy of beings, which are more closely connected with earth. So the Barhishats, as we saw, are involved in developing the physical body, but the Anishwata Pitris cannot do that. They are devoid of this kind of creative energy because they are too spiritual. So if we want to see this in a diagram, the lords of the flame are the Anishwatas that Blavatsky is mentioning, and they are devoid of this kind of more physical creative fire. And the lords of the moon are the Barhishat, and they are possessed of this creative fire. So the lords of lords called these two hierarchies of beings. And then what we have is that the moon gods, the Barhishats, they responded to this call. They went each on his allotted land, 7 of them, each on his lot. So 7 of these lords, which we have to interpret as 7 groups, 7 hierarchies of beings, they went to different parts of the earth, each on their own lot, to generate human beings, to emanate this astral body, this ethereal double from them, so that the monads may begin to start incarnating, if not in physical form yet, at least in a somewhat physical form. So the moon gods went, but the lords of the flame remained behind. They would not go, they would not create. So they were both called, the lords of the moon went, the lords of the flame remained behind. So let's see the first part, that they went each on his allotted land. The secret teachings show the divine progenitors created men on 7 portions of the globe, each on his lot. That is, each a different race of men externally and internally, and on different zones. This polygenistic claim is considered elsewhere. It is the hosts of the 4 material classes who create men simultaneously on 7 zones. So this more material class, which is the 6th order of celestial beings, go to different parts of the globe and create different human beings. Now, what Blavatsky or the Secret Doctrine proposes is that humanity did not start in one single point in the world, and from there it spread around the world. It says that humanity started simultaneously on different parts of the globe. Of course, the continents at the time were not in the same way that they are spread today. But it is interesting. Just a few weeks ago, there are some scientists that have discovered remains of early human beings in different parts in Africa that they seem to have been developing on parallel lines. So those scientists that have discovered this in particular, they are saying something similar to what Blavatsky is proposing here. They are saying it seems that humanity did not came from one single point, but they came from different points on Earth. Of course, this is problematic from the point of view of science. It is always easier to say that something started on one particular point, because if it started on different points at the same time, that requires far more coordination. That requires more external influence. Because what are the chances that by random processes the same development happened on different parts in the globe? If you think that things happen randomly, statistically speaking, that is very unlikely. So scientists refuse or are reluctant to accept this. But with these new findings, that they say that is what seems to have happened. So this is exactly what the Secret Doctrine says. Of course, from the point of view of the Secret Doctrine, the creation of human beings or human bodies for the monads is nothing random. It's part of a universal order where we see there are many entities and forces and a clear intelligence involved. So from a certain point of view, we could say that this is close to the idea of a creative design theory, but this creative design theory is not attached to a personal God. There is evolution, just as science says, and also there is an intelligence. It's not that we have only two options. Either there is a God that creates or there is a random evolution. We can say that both things are possible, and that is what the Secret Doctrine proposes. So Blavatsky explains that these moon gods that went and did their job, the Barhishats, although they are possessed of the creative fire, the more physical creative ability, they were devoid of the higher Mahatmic element. Mahat is a Sanskrit word for the universal mind. So they were able to produce physical bodies. They were not able to work at the level of the mind. So being on the level with the lower principles, they could only give birth to the outer man, or rather to the model of the physical, the astral man. So what she's saying is that we have at this point the monads that are incarnating in these models that the Pitris are generating. The monads represent the sixth and the seventh principles, Atma and Buddhi. This is what we can call the spirit. Then the lords of the moon are working on the double of the physical body. In technical theosophical terms, this is what is called the Linga Sharira, this more ethereal kind of body that is around the physical body, through which the third principle, or prana, flows and is assimilated into the physical body. And then the nature spirits will little by little generate like a physical layer around the etheric double, that would be the physical body. Now, to produce a complete human being, that human being needs a soul, which the mind is a manifestation of a soul. So we can say a soul or a mind. This has to do with two principles, with the fifth principle, which is the mind, properly speaking, manas, and the fourth principle, which is the more emotional aspect, which the Secret Doctrine says is the vehicle for the mind. Now, none of these hierarchies of beings, remember the monads are the fourth hierarchy of beings, the lords of the moon are the sixth, and the nature spirits are the seventh, none of them can work at the level of the mind. So who are in charge of helping at this level? They are the lords of the flame. The lords of the flame are, which is the fifth high order of celestial beings, are the ones that are related to helping the spirit to incarnate, so to say, in a soul, to awaken a mind which can serve as a bridge between the monad as a spirit and the body. So we have spirit, soul, and body. The soul is the bridge that brings the influence of the spirit into the body. Now the problem is that at this point, the lords of the flame remained behind. They would not go, they would not create. So Blavatsky explains that the Anishwatas are devoid of the grosser creative fire, hence they were unable to create physical men. So when the call went forth to create human beings, they could do nothing on the physical level. The lords of the moon did that. Because they have no double or astral body to project, as did the lower gods, which are the lords of the moon, since they were without any form. So the lords of the flame are formless, they cannot project this body. They are shown in exoteric allegories in Hinduism as yogis, kumaras, which means chaste youths, who became rebels, asuras they are called, fighting and opposing gods, etc., etc. So in the Hindu mythology, these gods that refuse to be involved in the creation of human beings are seen as demons because they disobeyed the call that went forth. So the word Sura means God. The word Asura means non-God. So many times they are seen as demons. And the idea in the Hindu mythology is that the Kumaras were these spiritual beings that they said they didn't want to engage in going into reproduction. Now you see that this sounds very similar to that group of celestial beings that refused to create in that we saw in the previous class, and that was a mistake, that they fell because of that. Now, this is where, because there are similitudes between these two things that happened, they are frequently confused. Even in the secret doctrine, one has to be very alert not to confuse these two things. These were two different refusals, as we are going to see. One refusal was actually a wise refusal, the other was not. So in the Hindu allegories, the two are mixed up. But Blavatsky says the Anishvatas refusing to get involved at this point in evolution is a correct action. She says it is through these Kumaras or Anishvatas, it is they alone who could complete a human being, that is, make of him a self-conscious, almost a divine being, a god on earth. So the Kumaras have the power to make human beings self-aware, but they refuse to get engaged. So Blavatsky says, agreeable to the esoteric interpretation, this was a self-sacrifice for the benefit of mankind. These rebels would not create will-less, irresponsible men as the obedient angels did. The obedient angels would be the lords of the moon. Nor could they endow human beings with only the temporary reflections of their own attributes, for even the latter, belonging to another and a so much higher plane of consciousness, would leave men still irresponsible, hence interfere with any possibility of higher progress. So at this point, Blavatsky is saying, if the Lords of the Flame would have gone and awakened the mind of humanity, or incarnate, as some of them did later, we are going to see, incarnate in the human beings at this point in evolution, they would have generated human beings that are irresponsible, will-less. So let's see, why is this? She says, no spiritual and psychic evolution is possible on earth, the lowest and most material plane, for one who on that plane, at all events, is inherently perfect and cannot accumulate either merit or demerit. Man remaining the pale shadow of the inert, immutable, and motionless perfection would have been doomed to pass through life on earth as in a heavy dreamless sleep, hence a failure on this plane. So what she's saying is that if the mind would have been awakened at this point in evolution, very early point in evolution, human beings would have been perfect, because the mind, the higher mind, is a spiritual entity, or is a spiritual state of consciousness in itself. If that higher mind would have incarnated in a physical body at the beginning of evolution, human beings would have been perfect just because the higher mind had no opposition from a certain point of view. What was needed is to let evolution go on for a little longer, so that the lower aspect of the human being would become stronger. And then once the lower aspect of a human being becomes stronger, when the souls incarnate, those souls would have the contrast between their inherent perfection and the tendencies of matter that now are stronger later in evolution. And in that conflict, in that contrast is that the latent powers in a soul can be awakened. So this, for example, if we were to live in the water with no motion, our muscles cannot develop. So we would be beings that have no, muscle strength if we are not moving, just in water or moving very slowly. You develop the muscles by working against the resistance that gravity and the weight of your body opposes. And in overcoming that resistance, you develop the muscles. So in a similar way, these celestial beings had to incarnate in a human being because the celestial beings are already spiritual. But what they need to do is to retain and develop that spirituality on the lower planes. If they had incarnated too fast, when matter is still too weak, when matter is still too spiritual, then they would not have developed anything. They would just be, as spiritual as they were on the higher planes, now on the lower, but their spiritual nature is too powerful to let the personality develop and generate any opposition. So that is what the Blavatsky is saying here. Hence, she says, as the higher Pitris or Dhyanis had no hand in his physical creation, we find primeval men issued from the bodies of his spiritually fireless progenitors described as mindless. So the first root race, because the lords of the flame refused to either incarnate or to help these monads incarnate with the mind, because of that, the lower bodies of the human beings remained mindless. Remember that the monad needs help from this fifth order of celestial beings to express through a physical body by means of a mind or a soul. By itself, it cannot do it. So at this point, we had a monad that was incarnated in an ethereal body, but because there was no bridge to influence the body, it was not a true incarnation. It was just a connection, but the bodies were still senseless. We are still in an embryonic stage of the development of human beings. So Blavatsky says the monad had no middle principles, these fifth and fourth, Kama and Manas, had no middle principles to serve him as a medium between the highest and the lowest, the spiritual man, which is the monad, and the physical brain, for he lacked manas, or the mind. The mind was not awakened. The monads, which incarnated in those empty shells, remained as unconscious as when separated from their previous incomplete forms and vehicles. So, without the awakening of the mind, the monads cannot be aware on the lower planes. As spirits, they are perfect on the higher planes. When they incarnate in these mindless bodies, they remain unconscious. Maybe similarly to when the soul incarnates in a baby, before the baby develops a mind. You cannot see much of self-awareness at the level of the baby, until little by little the baby develops a mind, a language, a concept or a sense that I am this body as different from the others. So the monads were still in a more embryonic state at the time. So this, we are describing the first root race, 7 times 7 shadows, or chayas, technically speaking, of future men, or amanasas, were thus born, each of his own color, complexion, and kind, each also inferior to his father or creator. The fathers, the boneless, could give no life to beings with bones. Their progeny were bhuta, phantoms, with neither form nor mind. Therefore they were called the chaya race, or the shadow race. So let's see what this means. 7 times 7 shadows, or chayas. This chaya is the term for shadow, or this image that was projected from the moon lords. 7 times 7 shadows of future men who were amanasas. Manas, remember, as Blavatsky will explain, means mind. Were thus born, each of his own color, complexion, and kind. So Blavatsky explains the Sanskrit word manu, as already remarked, comes from the root man in Sanskrit, which means to think. Hence, the manu is the thinker. Our manas, or mind, is the 5th principle in men. Hence, these shadows are called amanasa, mindless. So this first root race is all part of the same concept. There were 7 sub-races within this root race. All of them were mindless, and they were just chayas. They were just ethereal beings. Now, these 7 different communities that were created around the world, they were all different from each other. Probably they belonged to monads that had different levels of evolution. So they needed different conditions to evolve. And then it says that each of these shadows, or ethereal beings, were inferior to their fathers, to the lords of the moon, because these fathers, the boneless, remember they were of the airy bodies, they are not really physical, could give no life to beings with bones, meaning physical. So Blavatsky explains, those angels who in the exoteric legends obey the law are identical with the Barhishat Pitris, with the lunar gods. That is, those possessed of the physical creative fire. They could only clothe the human monads with their own astral selves, but they could not make men in their own image and likeness. They could not give their minds, for example, share or awaken the mind for the monads. So these shadows were born inferior to his creator, because the latter was a complete being of his kind. So the lunar moons, the lunar gods, they had a mind and they had this more ethereal nature, but they could not create a human being with a mind. So this root race was not really created in their own image, only in the image of their astral or ethereal self, but it was inferior to the gods who had a mind. And Blavatsky says that this God could not give to man that sacred spark which burns and expands into the flower of human reason and self-consciousness. This is Manas. Manas is the source of reason and self-consciousness. For they had it not to give. That doesn't mean they didn't have a mind. They weren't able to project their minds, so to say, to the monads. This is done by a higher hierarchy of celestial beings, or order of celestial beings. They could only project their lower natures. So this, the projecting of their minds, was left to that class of devas who became symbolized in Greece under the name of Prometheus, to those who had not to do with the physical body, yet everything to do with the purely spiritual man. So Blavatsky says that the story of Prometheus is an allegory of these gods that gave human beings their mind. When we say project the mind, give the mind, or create the mind, this is all allegorical. We will explore a little more what this may mean, although there are not many explanations, so we can just take it more allegorically. But she says that the story of Prometheus is an allegory for this. Prometheus, who went and tried to get the fire for humanity, went to the sun to get fire for humanity. This fire represents the mind, but in the process of getting fire for humanity. Their wings were burned and they fell. They fell to the earth. And this is an allegory that, as we are going to see, when these dhyanis project the mind to humanity, that implies a fall for them because they have to come down to the level of humanity in order to do that. So according to Blavatsky, the whole myth of Prometheus is an allegory of what the Lords of the Flame did for humanity. But that is later in evolution. So far we have that only the moon gods went to start participating in the creation of a human being, and their progeny were Bhuta, which means like a ghost or a phantom, with neither form, because they were not physical, nor mind. Therefore, they were called the Chaya race. So the first root race, no mind, no physical form. They were a ghost race in a sense. So Blavatsky says, the first race are the astral shadows of their progenitors, the moon lords. The body was devoid of all understanding. The inner being, the higher self or monad, though within the earthly frame, was still unconnected with it, because the link, the manas, was not there as yet. The subtle bodies remain without understanding, manas, until the advent of the suras, of the gods, that are now called asuras, not gods, says the commentary. So, these Lords of the Flame that refused to create at this point, because if they had been involved when the human frame was not ripe, they would have created only irresponsible beings. So these gods that refused are now called the not gods, the asuras. So the bodies remain without mind until these not gods in the exoteric allegories came into activity. And so the final slide that we are going to see today, then having projected their shadows and made men of one element of ether, so having projected this ethereal aspect of themselves, the progenitors, the Pitris Barhishat, the Lord Moons, or the Lords of the Moon, reascend to Maharloka, which is a spiritual plane, whence they descend periodically when the world is renewed to give birth to new men. So the idea is that these Lords of the Moon come down to earth every time that is necessary to create a new race of men. And in this way, as the races change from one race to the other, and when we are talking about race in the context of the secret doctrine, we are talking about evolutionary stages, not ethnicity. So with each new root race, the Lords of the Moon come and they help to reshape the body of the human beings, because as we are going to see, the bodies change with each root race. But in between, they go back to their own plane from where they came originally. So this is where we are going to stop today. This is the first root race in which the Lords of the Moon are involved to create, and the Lords of the Flame have refused to do so and to get involved. In our next class, we are going to see what these Lords of the Flame did when the time came.